Hello, everyone, and welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Eric Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. We've got a breakthrough in talks between the world's largest economies, and the ceasefire between India and Pakistan still holds. More on these stories coming up, but first, we'll get you caught up on the latest headlines. Now that a ceasefire with Pakistan is in place, India reopens 32 airports. The airports are now available for civil aircraft operations. Moscow fires over 100 drones at Ukraine as President Zelensky awaits Russian President Putin's response for a meeting in Turkey this week. Taiwan conducts its first live firing of high-mobility artillery rocket systems purchased from the United States as the island faces an increase in Chinese incursions. An Indian batter, Virat Kohli, announces his immediate retirement from the Test cricket. The 36-year-old has played 123 tests and scored over 9,000 runs. We begin with the latest from the Indian subcontinent. Tensions between India and Pakistan continue to keep the region on edge after India launched Operation Sindoor on May 7th in response to the April 22nd Pahalgam terror attack. In the latest, the intervening night of May 11th and May 12th remained largely peaceful across Jammu and Kashmir and other areas. The semblance of calm reinforced a recently agreed upon ceasefire, which Pakistan violated on May 10th, barely 2 hours after it was first agreed upon. Prime Minister Narendra Modi chaired a high-level meeting at his residence on Monday, attended by Defense Minister, External Affairs Minister, National Security Advisor, as well as the Chief of Defense Staff. All three service chiefs were also present in the meeting as New Delhi continues to keep up with its anti-terror posture in and beyond the Indian subcontinent, especially in the wake of Operation Sindoor. Now, earlier this morning, while addressing a special briefing, India's Air Marshal said that his country's fight is with terrorists, their support, infrastructure, and not with Pakistan military or its people. The Air Marshal added it's a pity the Pakistan army chose to intervene and bat for the terrorists, which compelled India to respond.
We also iterated that our fight was with terrorists and their support infrastructure. However, it is a pity that the Pakistan military chose to intervene and bat for the terrorists, which compelled us to respond in kind.
The Indian military also showed the debris of a likely Chinese air-to-air missile which was used by Pakistan while targeting India. The wreckage of loiter munitions also showed a Turkish drone there as well. Now, snubbing the Pakistani propaganda, the Indian Air Force said that the country's military bases as well as defense and defense systems continue to remain fully operational. And at the same time, keeping up with India's posture as a possible nuclear power, the Indian military denied the reports of striking an area previously reported to be housing Pakistan's nuclear facilities.
All our military bases, all our systems continue to remain fully operational and ready to undertake any future missions should the need so arise.
Measured, responsible, and non-escalatory, this is how India has described its anti-terror Operation Sindoor, even as the two sides maintain an uneasy calm along the line of control and the international border. The heightened state of hostilities will continue to remain in the spotlight for the time to come. From deciding to keep out of it to claiming to have mediated a complete ceasefire, America's stance on the escalating India-Pakistan tensions shifted very quickly. On May 10th, in a post on Truth Social, President Donald Trump said that Washington had mediated a long night of talks, after which the two sides agreed to a truce. And this announcement came even before New Delhi's and Islamabad's. While India did not mention U.S. mediation, Pakistan thanked Washington. Our next report gets you more details.
We are not going to get involved in the middle of war. That's fundamentally none of our business and has nothing to do with America's ability to control it.
From this to this. From a hands-off approach to an abrupt, complete ceasefire announcement by US President Donald Trump after what he claimed was a long night of talks. What made the United States change its stance on the worst fighting between India and Pakistan in decades?
A little bit of the past. They've been fighting for a long time. They've been fighting for many, many decades and centuries, actually, if you really think about it.
Reports say worries in the White House began to grow as an increasing number of artillery, drones and missiles were being exchanged between India and Pakistan. Washington feared the conflict between the two nuclear powers could spiral out of control since there were no signs of de-escalation. So from a not my monkey, not my circus approach, the United States claimed to have shifted to play the truce maker. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio also said he, along with Vice President J.D. Vance, engaged with senior Indian and Pakistani officials, including Prime Ministers, Foreign Ministers, Chiefs of Army Staff and the National Security Advisors. When J.D. Vance dialed India's Prime Minister Modi, reports say he received a clear message from New Delhi. If Pakistan attacks, India will retaliate harder.
This is a strike on the Noor Khan Air Base.
Hours after this call, responding to Pakistan's barrage of drones and artillery, India struck 3 Pakistani bases. This triggered more panic in Washington. This time, Marco Rubio reportedly picked up the phone for another round of diplomacy, placing separate calls to India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar and the Pakistani Army Chief Asim Munir. In that call, Rubio reportedly asked if India would de-escalate if Pakistan did too, to which India reminded the US that this had been its position all along. On Saturday, after some 2.5 hours of talks between Director General of Military of Operations of both India and Pakistan, the two sides reportedly agreed to stop the exchange of fire. But before either sides could announce the ceasefire, Trump popped it on his Truth Social account. Soon after, India's Foreign Secretary addressed a briefing but made no mention of any role by the United States.
Director General of Military Operations of Pakistan called the Director General of Military Operations of India at 15:35 hours earlier this afternoon. It was agreed between them that both sides would stop all firing and military action on land and in the air and sea.
But Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif thanked the United States as well as other countries he said helped to mediate, Saudi Arabia and China. Reports say the talks between India and Pakistan had already been underway, even as drones and missiles flew back and forth. Some even labelled Trump's post as an overreach. But Trump was not to be stopped. He followed his ceasefire announcement with another post, offering to help find a solution to the Kashmir issue. Now Kashmir is an integral part of India and New Delhi has been clear. Kashmir is not open for negotiations, least of all through a third-party mediator. Last time, when Trump tried to intervene in Kashmir during his first term in 2019, it triggered a ferocious backlash in India. Trump had even gone ahead to claim that Prime Minister Modi had invited him to mediate, which India instantly denied. So was this an attempt by US President Donald Trump to finally kickstart his truce bandwagon, as the stalled promises on Gaza and Ukraine remain unfulfilled?
And now moving to the war in Europe, where a potential turning point in the Russia-Ukraine war may be approaching, as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced he is ready to meet President Vladimir Putin personally for peace talks in Istanbul this Thursday.
I will be in Turkey this Thursday, May 15th, and I am expecting Putin in Turkey, personally. I hope this time Putin will not look for reasons why he can't do something. We are ready to talk to end the war, Thursday, Turkey. President Trump supported it. All leaders support it.
The Ukrainian leader's unexpected statement came hours after President Donald Trump urged Ukraine to immediately accept Putin's offer for direct negotiations in Turkey. Now, the latest developments also come on the heels of a major diplomatic push from the European leaders. Over the weekend, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, France's Emmanuel Macron, and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and Poland's Donald Tusk met in Kyiv. Together, they issued a strong ultimatum to Moscow, agreed to an unconditional 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine by Monday, or face massive new sanctions targeting Russia's energy and banking sectors.
En cas de violation de ce cessez-le-feu,
In the event of a violation of the ceasefire, we have agreed that massive sanctions would be prepared and coordinated between Europeans and Americans.
entre Européens et Américains.
President Donald Trump, however, undercut the plan, saying Ukraine should go ahead with the talks regardless of a ceasefire. Taking to Truth Social, President Trump wrote, "Have the meeting now." He further claimed this would reveal whether a peace deal was truly possible, and if not, allow Western leaders to plan their next move accordingly. Then, in a televised address on Sunday, Russia's Putin responded. In fact, he welcomed the idea of quote-unquote serious negotiations and suggested that talks in Turkey could lead to a new truce. However, he didn't acknowledge the 30-day ceasefire ultimatum or commit to halting attacks. Instead, he emphasized addressing the root causes of the conflict.
To resume direct negotiations, and I emphasize without any preconditions. We propose to begin without delay next Thursday, May 15th, in Istanbul, where they were held earlier and where they were interrupted. Moreover, a real truce, which would be observed not only by Russia, but also by the Ukrainian side, would be the first step, I repeat, to a long-term, sustainable peace, and not a prologue to the continuation of the armed conflict after the rearmament.
Now, for months, Ukraine and its allies have in fact insisted that talks can only begin after Russia agrees to stop hostilities. French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Merz both reiterated the position, with the German Chancellor saying talks cannot begin until weapons fall silent.
At the end of this week, I'm also personally moved that, as the German Chancellor, I'm able to stand here today in this circle and, together with the Polish Prime Minister, the British Prime Minister, and the French President, to express not only our full solidarity and support to our friend and partner, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, but also, in this difficult phase of a war that has been going on for over 3 years, on an almost historic day, to say that we stand firmly and remain firmly at Ukraine's side.
Meanwhile, Secretary of State Marco Rubio will be in Turkey from Wednesday to Friday for an informal NATO summit, placing him in the country the same day the talks are set to begin. And as Thursday approaches, the world watches closely. Will a face-to-face meeting between Zelensky and Putin bring peace or expose just how far apart the two sides really are? And now in news that will certainly make the markets happy, the world's two biggest economies embroiled in a massive trade war have now made a major breakthrough. According to the White House, the United States and China have reached an agreement after extensive talks in Geneva that were aimed at avoiding a further tariff escalation and easing strained global supply chains. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent called the negotiations productive and constructive, while the Chinese Vice Premier described them as candid.
The two sides held in-depth exchanges on trade and economic issues of respective concern. The atmosphere of the meeting was candid, in-depth, and constructive. The meeting achieved substantial progress and reached important consensus.
Good afternoon. I'm happy to report that we made substantial progress between the United States and China in these very important trade talks. First, I want to thank our Swiss host. The Swiss government has been very kind in providing us this wonderful venue.
Now, this was the first time senior officials from both China and the United States came face to face since President Trump returned to the White House. And according to a joint statement, both countries have agreed to a 90-day pause in the tariff war and slashed their import tariffs by 115%.
We have reached an agreement on a 90-day pause and substantially moved down the tariff levels. Both sides on the reciprocal tariffs will move their tariffs down 115%. We had very robust discussions. Both sides showed great respect. We've identified 5 or 6 strategic industries and supply chain vulnerabilities, and we will continue moving toward U.S. independence or reliable supplies from allies on those. But the consensus from both delegations this weekend is neither side wants a decoupling. We do want trade. We want more balanced trade.
Now, the Geneva Agreement is a major step towards de-escalation in a tit-for-tat that has rattled global commerce, triggered massive market sell-offs, and sparked fears of an economic slowdown. In fact, it all began back in February when U.S. imposed a 10% tariff on Chinese goods, prompting immediate retaliation from Beijing. And by early April, President Trump's tariffs on China had reached a whopping 145%. With some Chinese products facing as much as a 245% tax. In response, China slapped 125% tariffs on all U.S. goods. And now there was even more confusion over which side made the first move towards the Geneva talks. While China claimed it was the United States who initiated the call, President Trump firmly denied it, not wanting to appear as the one who blinked first. And with nearly $700 billion worth of goods moving between the U.S. and China every year, the stakes could not be higher. The Geneva Pact may not resolve all differences, but certainly it is a positive step towards stabilizing one of the world's most fragile economic relationships. And we end today with a massive gift from Qatar to the United States. The White House is in talks with Qatar's royal family over a possible transfer of a luxury Boeing 747 jumbo jet, a plane that could serve as Air Force One during President Trump's second term. While officials stress it's not a gift but a temporary use agreement, the deal is already raising legal and ethical questions, especially with plans for the aircraft to eventually land at the Trump Presidential Library. Here's our report on the Flying Palace and the turbulence it's causing in Washington.
In what can only be described as the most presidential yard sale ever, the Trump administration is reportedly eyeing a luxury 747-8 jumbo jet from Qatar. Not as a gift, Qatar insists, but as a very friendly loan that might just fly into the Trump Presidential Library later on. Because why settle for old Air Force One when you can cruise in a flying palace? While Qatar's royal family politely clarified they are merely discussing a temporary transfer, US President Donald Trump took to Truth Social, all caps blazing, calling it a gift free of charge. After all, why should America pay top dollar for a plane when a rich friend is willing to lend one no strings attached, other than parking it at his library once he's done? Meanwhile, Qatar's media attaché Ali Al-Ansari said the talks are still in legal review. He said to a media house that the aircraft is for temporary use, that is, if the deal goes through. Here's his full quote.
The possible transfer of an aircraft for temporary use as Air Force One is currently under consideration between Qatar's Ministry of Defense and the US Department of Defense. But the matter remains under review by the respective legal departments, and no decision has been made.
For the curious, there's a pesky constitutional rule that stops US officials from accepting lavish goodies from foreign princes and kings, unless Congress gives them a thumbs up. Experts are calling Trump's latest jumbo jet joyride plan outrageous. Some are even accusing him of treating the federal government like his own personal travel agency. But Trump isn't new to the art of the deal with Qatar. Back in 2019, he happily announced a major airplane purchase from them. And let's not forget, Qatar gifted Turkey a luxury plane in 2018. So it's not exactly their first rodeo in plane democracy. For now, the so-called gift, if it's given to the United States, will undergo the usual presidential glow-up by the US Air Force. Because even flying palaces need a security makeover before it begins shuttling around the President of the United States of America. And while Boeing is still struggling to deliver Air Force One replacements, the Qatar jet looks like a tempting shortcut. If all goes as Trump tweeted, the plane, worth nearly $400 million, will make its grand debut before gliding its way into the Trump Presidential Library's collection of shiny things by 2029. In the end, whether it's called a gift, a loan, or strategic aviation diplomacy, one thing is clear. Trump's second term is set to be first class.
We're at the Kennedy Center.
That's all we have time for today. We certainly thank you for tuning in. We hope to see you again right back here tomorrow. Thanks everyone for watching.